A family booked the Wendy space for a children's party at night, something unusual, since the restaurant was practically empty. I found it strange from the start, but I didn't want to question it too much. After all, it was just another unusual event during my shift. When they arrived, I noticed something was off. The kids weren't making any noise, as if they had been coached to stay silent. They just observed everything with fixed stares, almost like expressionless dolls. The adults also stood out, all dressed formally, looking more like they were at a funeral than a birthday party. They avoided eye contact and exchanged knowing glances, as if sharing some secret I wasn't supposed to know. I tried to focus on my work, but the whole scene made me uneasy. When I went to serve the food, I noticed something even stranger: none of the dishes were being touched. No child asked for soda, no one ate the fries or even touched the burgers. In the center of the table, there was a cake with unlit candles and an inscription that sent chills down my spine: just follow the instructions. There was no birthday name, no colorful drawings. It was as if that cake was part of some bizarre ritual. I tried to hide my confusion while serving the drinks, but I could feel their eyes on me the entire time. It was as if they were scrutinizing my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake. When the party ended and they left, leaving the space perfectly tidy, I knew I had to investigate further. Something about that night didn't make sense, and I couldn't shake the bad feeling in my gut. After the family left, I started cleaning the tables to put everything back in order. That's when I found a cell phone forgotten under one of the chairs. It looked ordinary, but something told me this wasn't just a careless oversight. I hesitated for a few seconds before picking it up. After all, it might be important to return it to its owner. But when I turned it on, the screen was unlocked, as if someone wanted it to be found. What I saw inside took my breath away: photos of gagged people, huddled in the corner of a dark warehouse. Some looked terrified, others completely defeated. And then, among the images, I recognized someone, a Wendy's employee who had recently gone missing. Everyone at the restaurant thought he had simply quit without notice, but now I knew something far worse had happened. My hands started trembling as I scrolled through the photos. There was no doubt that this family and their strange party were involved in something sinister. It was as if they had used the restaurant as a front for some criminal operation. I tried to calm myself and think about what to do next. My first instinct was to call the police, but something made me hesitate. What if they came back? What if they found out I had the phone? I looked around the empty restaurant, feeling like the walls were watching me. I decided to keep the phone and investigate further before taking any action. I knew I needed to figure out who these people were and what they wanted, but I also knew I was about to step into something much bigger and more dangerous than I could imagine. In the days that followed, I could barely concentrate on work. Every time the phone rang or the restaurant door opened, my heart raced, thinking they had come back for the phone. I spent hours looking at the photos, trying to find clues about the warehouse or any detail that might identify where those people were being held. But the images were deliberately vague: just a dark space, some rusty chains, and the frightened faces of the prisoners. The missing employee looked especially broken, with marks of abuse on his face and an expression of despair that made me sick. The more I looked, the more I felt I had to do something, but I also knew that one wrong move could put my life in danger. I decided to seek help discreetly. I went to the police and told them everything, showing the photos from the phone as evidence. They were shocked to see the images, especially since they confirmed the disappearance of the employee. "This is much bigger than we thought," one of the detectives said as he carefully examined the photos. He warned me not to talk to anyone about what I had found and assured me they would start investigating immediately. Even so, I left the station with a heavy weight in my chest. I knew I had done the right thing, but I also knew that now I was a witness, and possibly a target. At every unfamiliar sound, I wondered if they already knew I had found the phone. It was as if I had stepped into a dangerous game without knowing the rules, and now all I could do was try to survive. Paranoia began to take over my routine. I avoided going out at night and changed my route to work every day, as if that could protect me from something I didn't fully understand. Every car that drove by slowly or unfamiliar person near the restaurant made my body freeze in fear. I tried to hide my nervousness from my coworkers, but I knew they noticed something was off. "You've been kind of quiet lately," one of the waitresses commented once. I brushed it off with a lame excuse, saying I was tired, but deep down, I knew it was much more than that. The image of the missing employee wouldn't leave my mind, that hollow look haunted me even in my dreams. I wondered how many other people were trapped in that warehouse and if they were still alive. Days later, the police called with news. They had traced the phone to a criminal group specializing in kidnappings and extortion. The restaurant, apparently, had been used before as a meeting point to plan operations. The children's party, then, was just the perfect cover, something discreet that no one would question. But now they had enough leads to act. "We're going to conduct a rescue operation," the detective said, "but you need to stay out of it." He made me promise not to tell anyone and to keep my routine normal. It was impossible to follow that last part. How could I act normally knowing those people were suffering? All I could think about was that if I had found the phone sooner, maybe I could have helped earlier. Now, all I could do was wait and hope the police would arrive in time. The wait was agonizing. I tried to distract myself with work, but my mind kept drifting back to that warehouse and the gagged faces in the photos. Every minute felt like an eternity, as if time itself was conspiring against me. Finally, a week later, the police called again. They had found the warehouse and carried out the rescue. Several victims were freed, including the missing employee. He was weak and traumatized, but alive. When he learned that I had found the phone and alerted the authorities, he asked to see me. We met at the station, and though he could barely speak, he thanked me with a look that said more than words ever could. Still, we both knew it didn't erase everything he and the others had been through. Even with the case resolved, the experience left deep scars on me. I could never look at the restaurant the same way again. That place which had once been just a workplace now seemed to carry dark secrets in every corner. I started avoiding reserved parties and strange groups, always alert for anything out of the ordinary. Sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could still see those frightened faces in the dark warehouse. They were a constant reminder of how dangerous the world can be, even in the most unexpected places. I learned that sometimes paying attention can save lives, but it can also put you in situations that are hard to escape from unscathed. And no matter how hard I try to move on, I know this story will haunt me for the rest of my life. I was checking the security cameras during the graveyard shift when I noticed something strange. One of the cameras was showing old footage, as if someone had hacked the system to replay scenes from the past. At first, I thought it might be a technical glitch. Those things happen, right? But then I started paying closer attention and noticed disturbing details. In one of the recordings, I saw former employees preparing trays with food that had never officially been sold at the restaurant. It was as if they were putting together special meals for someone, or something, out of the ordinary. The images were too clear to be a coincidence. I decided to confront the manager right away, thinking he might have some logical explanation. I showed him the footage and asked what was going on. He gave me a threatening look, almost as if he were daring me to keep investigating. After a few tense seconds of silence, he muttered, "These images don't exist." I froze, not understanding what he meant, or why he seemed so nervous. That response only deepened my curiosity and fear. When the manager left the room, I decided to take a walk around the back of the restaurant to see if I could find anything suspicious. That's when I found a box hidden behind some old supply crates. Inside, there were blood-stained uniforms and receipts for transactions that didn't make sense, large amounts at odd hours, unfamiliar names, and dates that didn't match our official records. My heart started racing as I tried to figure out what it all meant. Before I could leave and call someone to check what was going on, I heard voices coming from the storage room. I froze in place, unsure of what to do. As I turned to leave, two masked men appeared carrying sealed black bags. One of them smiled when he saw me and said, in an eerily calm tone, "You're going to help now." Those words chilled me to the bone. Help with what? I asked, trying to mask the panic in my voice. They didn't answer, just kept staring at me as if I already knew exactly what was happening. One of them dropped the black bag on the floor and began rummaging through its contents while the other grabbed my arm, preventing me from moving. Inside the bag was something heavy, wrapped in thick plastic. I didn't need to see what it was to know it wasn't good. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt paralyzed. The masked man who was searching through the bag finally pulled out an object wrapped in aluminum foil and placed it on a nearby table. He handed me a knife and said, "Unwrap this." I could barely breathe properly, let alone obey. But something about the way he looked at me told me resisting would only make things worse. Shaking, I took the knife and slowly began unwrapping the package. When I saw what was inside, my stomach churned. It was raw meat, but it didn't look like it came from any animal I recognized. The texture and color were wrong, as if it were something different. I looked at them, trying to understand what was happening, but all I got was a cold, impatient stare. "Hurry up," the second man said, pointing to a pot on the stove. That's when I realized, they wanted me to cook it. Whatever it wasn't normal, and it definitely wasn't legal. I knew I had stumbled into something much bigger than I could have imagined, and now I had to quickly decide between obeying or risking my life trying to escape. My mind was racing. I knew I had two options, either do what they wanted and become part of whatever this was, or try to run and risk being caught, or worse. But something inside me refused to touch that strange meat again. I dropped the knife on the floor and took a step back, trying to look confident even though my whole body was trembling. "I'm not doing this," I murmured, trying to sound firm. The two masked men exchanged glances for a moment, as if assessing their next move. Then, without saying a word, one of them picked up the package of meat and started preparing it himself, while the other held me tighter. It was as if I had ceased to be useful to them, but that didn't mean I was free. They pushed me into a corner of the storage room and began talking in low voices, ignoring my presence. That's when I realized there were more people involved in this than I had thought. While I stood there, helpless, I noticed details that I had previously overlooked. There were more sealed black bags stacked in a corner, along with boxes labeled with company names I'd never heard of. Some of them had strange symbols drawn on the sides, as if they were warnings or marks of some kind of secret organization. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but I knew I had to find a way out of there. When one of the men got distracted for a moment, I seized the opportunity to slip toward the door. I don't know if they noticed or simply decided not to follow me, but I managed to escape the storage room and run out of the restaurant. As I drove home, all I could think about was one thing: the hacked camera footage, the blood-stained uniforms, and the illegal receipts. It all made sense now, and I knew I had to tell someone before it was too late. As soon as I got home, I locked the door and closed all the windows, as if that could protect me from what I had just witnessed. My hands were still shaking as I tried to organize my thoughts. I knew I had to do something, but what? I called the police but hung up before completing the call. What if they were already involved? What if this was bigger than I could imagine? I decided to go to a police station far from my town, hoping no one there had connections to the restaurant or those masked men. When I finally spoke to a detective, I showed him the photos of the hacked camera footage I had saved on my phone and told him everything: the blood-stained uniforms, the sealed black bags, the strange meat. He furrowed his brow as he listened, taking quick notes. "This could be part of an underground network," he said seriously. "They use places like this for illegal operations without raising suspicion." His words only confirmed what I already feared: I had stumbled into something much bigger than just a restaurant at night. In the days that followed, the police began discreetly investigating the location. I avoided going near the restaurant but followed the news anxiously. A few weeks later, they discovered that the place had been used as a distribution point for a criminal organization trafficking illegal goods, including adulterated food and even human organs disguised in ordinary packaging. The manager and several employees were arrested, along with multiple people linked to the operation. Even so, I knew I wasn't completely safe. Sometimes, as I walked down the street or drove to work, I felt like I was being watched. I don't know if it was paranoia or if someone really was keeping an eye on me, but the feeling of being marked never left me. That night changed my life forever, and now I know that not all secrets should be uncovered, especially when they can put your life at risk. Even though the operation was dismantled, the experience left scars I know will never fade. Every time I hear footsteps behind me or see someone wearing a mask in public, my whole body shivers, as if I'm back in that dark storage room. I try to convince myself that I did the right thing by reporting everything, but sometimes I wonder, did they really catch everyone involved? Is there still someone out there, waiting to get revenge? These questions haunt me constantly, turning even the simplest moments of everyday life into high-alert situations. To this day, I can't look at a work uniform without remembering the bloodstains I found in that hidden box. Today, months later, I'm still trying to move on, but that night is etched into my memory like an open wound. I learned the hard way that the world is full of dark secrets, many of them hidden in places where we least expect, even in an apparently ordinary restaurant. If I had ignored that strange camera system, I might never have discovered anything. But I also know that if I had closed my eyes, I might have unintentionally helped something terrible continue to exist. Now, I live with this ambiguity, between the relief of having done the right thing and the constant fear that it might catch up with me again. Sometimes, when I pass by the old restaurant, now closed with its windows boarded up, I feel a tightness in my chest. I don't know if I'll ever fully get over it, but I've learned that some experiences change us forever, and that sometimes, the price of doing the right thing is carrying its weight for the rest of your life. I needed money fast. I was drowning in debt and knew the Wendy's cash register stayed full during night shifts, when there were few employees and almost no customers. I planned everything meticulously. I waited until the manager left to pick up supplies and triggered a fake fire alarm to empty the restaurant. When everyone ran out, I grabbed as much cash as I could, stuffed it into my pants pocket, and fled through the back door. My heart was pounding in my chest as I ran through the deserted streets, trying not to think about the consequences of what I'd just done. I just wanted to fix my financial problems, but something deep in my mind was already whispering that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. When I finally reached my car and sat behind the wheel, I noticed something strange. Some of the bills were stained red, as if they had been dyed with fresh ink. I thought it might be some new security measure, but something deep inside me told me it was different, more sinister. I decided to count the money as soon as I got home, still trembling with nerves. There was about $1,000 in total, but among the bills, I found a small plastic envelope containing a handwritten note, "You know where to deliver this." There was no signature or additional details. I froze, trying to understand what it meant. It was as if someone already knew I would rob the cash register that night, as if everything had been planned by someone else, and I was just a pawn on the chessboard. Hours later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered with shaking hands, and a distorted voice said simply, "Deliver the package tomorrow at midnight. The instructions are on your car's GPS." Before I could respond or ask anything, the call ended. I rushed to my car and turned on the ignition, and to my horror, the GPS was already on, showing a pre-programmed destination, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. My stomach churned as I tried to figure out how this was possible. I had never used that GPS before, and now it was set to take me to a specific location, as if they knew exactly where I was and what I would do. I sat frozen for a few minutes, staring at the address on the screen, trying to decide what to do. But deep down, I knew I had no choice. If I refused, they would come after me. The next day, I drove to the designated location, the envelope in my pocket and my heart in my throat. When I arrived at the warehouse, I was greeted by two masked men who seemed to be expecting me. They didn't say anything at first, just watched me silently as I handed over the envelope. One of them took it without hesitation and handed me another package, larger and heavier. Open it when you're far away, one of them muttered before disappearing into the darkness like ghosts. I returned to my car completely confused and terrified, unsure of what was happening. During the entire drive back, I felt as if I were being watched, but there was no one on the deserted streets. When I finally got back to my apartment, I locked all the doors and windows, trying to convince myself I was safe, at least for now. Back in my apartment, I opened the new package with trembling hands, unsure of what to expect. Inside, there were secretly taken photos of me from the past few months, at home, at work, even at the grocery store. Each image was accompanied by details about my daily routine, the times I left the house, the places I frequented, and the people I talked to. But the most terrifying part was a list of names with addresses. Each name had a red X next to it, except mine. At the top of the list, a short and direct message: "You are now part of the operation." I felt my body go cold as I read those words repeatedly, trying to understand what they meant. It was as if I had been forcibly recruited into something much bigger than a simple robbery. They knew everything about me, my entire life had been mapped out, and I had no idea how it had happened. That's when I realized the theft hadn't been an isolated act. I had been manipulated from the start, chosen for some reason I still couldn't comprehend. Everything had been planned: the fire alarm, the stained bills, the envelope, the GPS. I wasn't just a desperate thief, I was a carefully placed piece in a criminal scheme far more complex than I could have imagined. The feeling of being trapped in an invisible web was suffocating. I tried to think of a way out, but I knew any wrong move could put me in even greater danger. If I tried to report it, they'd probably already be one step ahead. Now, I was part of the operation, and there was no going back. In the days that followed, I tried to live a normal life, but it was impossible to ignore the weight of that list and the photos. Every time I left the house, I felt like I was being watched. Even at work, I caught myself looking over my shoulder, trying to spot someone suspicious among the customers or coworkers. I knew I was being paranoid, but I couldn't help it. They knew every detail of my life, even things I thought no one would notice, like the fact that I always had coffee at a specific place on Saturday mornings. The feeling of invasion was overwhelming, as if my privacy had been ripped away from me by force. I didn't know who these people were or what they wanted from me, but it was clear there was no easy escape. I started discreetly investigating the names on the list, using the internet to search for any available information. What I found scared me even more: everyone with a red X next to their name had disappeared in the past few months. Some were mentioned in old news articles about people last seen in public places, others seemed to have vanished without a trace. My name was the only one without an X, but I knew that didn't mean safety. On the contrary, it probably meant I had a specific role in the operation before being eliminated too. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to find a way out. But how do you escape something you barely understand? How do you fight enemies who seem to know everything about you? I decided to seek help, but I knew I had to be extremely careful. I couldn't trust anyone close to me, they might be under surveillance too. I went to a police station far from my city and told a detective everything, showing him the photos, the list, and the note. He listened in silence, but I could tell he was skeptical. "This sounds like something out of a movie," he said, shaking his head. When I insisted about the disappearances on the list, he promised to investigate, but I could see in his eyes that he thought I was making up stories to justify the restaurant robbery. I left the station frustrated and even more scared. I knew I was on my own. If I wanted to survive, I'd have to protect myself on my own. Today, months later, I still live in fear. I've changed apartments, switched jobs, and tried to erase any digital trail that could be used against me. But the feeling of being watched has never completely left me. Sometimes, when I see someone masked or notice a suspicious car following me, I'm transported back to that night at Wendy's and the moment I decided to rob the cash register. I learned the hard way that some choices can put you on paths you can't escape from. Now, I'm just another name on a list, waiting to find out my final fate. And no matter how hard I try to move forward, I know this story won't end well for me. What started as desperation for money turned into a nightmare I can't wake up from. I had been on the run for days. After a botched robbery, I knew the police were after me, and my options were running out. That night, as I drove aimlessly through the deserted streets of the city, I decided I needed to hide, at least for a few hours. Wendy's seemed perfect, open 24 hours, with few employees and almost no customers at that hour. I walked in trying to look normal, bought a drink, and sat at a table in the back, near the bathroom. My plan was simple: stay there until I could think of something better. I was exhausted, my nerves were frayed, but I still tried to stay calm. Pretending to be just another late-night customer was my only chance to go unnoticed. But something felt off from the start. The employees seemed nervous, exchanging quick glances and whispering to each other. One of them, a young guy at the register, stared at me for a moment too long before looking away. I thought it might be paranoia. After all, I was in that constant state of alert where every movement seemed like a threat. I tried to focus on my drink and ignore the growing discomfort. Still, I couldn't help but observe my surroundings. There was something strange in the air, as if everyone there was waiting for something, or someone. Even so, I stayed quiet, hoping no one would pay much attention to me. After all, I just wanted to survive until morning. Then, I heard loud voices coming from the entrance. Two men walked in quickly, dressed in black clothes and wearing sunglasses, even though it was the middle of the night. They didn't order anything at the counter. Instead, they began searching the place as if looking for something, or someone. My heart raced. I froze in place, trying to blend into the chair, praying they wouldn't notice me. But then one of them looked directly at me and smiled. "We found you," he said, walking toward me with an unsettling calm. Before they could get too close, I jumped up and ran to the back, trying to hide in the storage room. I knew it was risky, but staying put meant being caught right then and there. Inside, I found something that left me paralyzed: stacks of boxes labeled with unfamiliar company names, all sealed and marked with red numbers. Next to them, there was an open folder with photos of various people, including mine. Each photo had a red X next to the face. Below my picture, a handwritten note read, "Top priority." My stomach churned as I processed it all. That Wendy's wasn't just a restaurant. It was an operations hub for something much bigger, and I had chosen the worst possible place to hide. Before I could leave, the two men appeared at the storage room door, blocking my only exit. One of them held a black plastic bag, and the other gave me a cold smile as he said, "Did you really think it would be easy to escape?" I froze in place, unsure of what to do. My mind screamed to run, fight, or find some way out, but my body felt paralyzed by fear. The two men approached slowly, like predators circling their prey. The one holding the plastic bag opened it calmly, revealing a black object I recognized as a silenced gun. "You have no idea how inconvenient this has been," the other said, still smiling, as he closed the door behind them. I knew I was trapped. There were no windows in the storage room, no other way out. I tried to think fast, looking for something, anything, I could use to defend myself. But all I saw around me were stacked boxes and empty shelves. I was completely at their mercy. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the men pulled a phone from his pocket and started typing quickly. He frowned for a moment before muttering something to the other. They exchanged tense looks, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe they had received new orders about what to do with me. Without further explanation, they put the gun back in the bag and dragged me back into the restaurant. To my surprise, instead of killing me or taking me away, they handed me directly over to the police, who were apparently already on their way to the scene. "He's all yours," one of them said as they handed me over to the officers, before disappearing into the darkness of the early morning. I was confused, exhausted, and terrified, but I knew one thing: I had been spared for reasons I'd probably never understand. Days later, as I tried to process everything that had happened, the police explained more about that place. The Wendy's was being used by a criminal gang to coordinate illegal activities, from trafficking to extortion and money laundering. My name was on a list of priority targets, marked with a red X as top priority. But ironically, I was saved because the gang itself decided I wasn't worth the risk of elimination. Maybe they were being closely monitored, or maybe they had received orders from above to avoid drawing attention at that moment. Whatever the reason, they chose to hand me over to the police rather than deal with me directly. It was a stroke of luck I never imagined possible. Today, months later, I still think about that night at Wendy's every time I pass a similar restaurant. I can't look at places like that without getting chills down my spine. The experience left deep marks on me, both physical and emotional. I learned the hard way that the world is full of dark secrets, many of them hidden behind doors that seem harmless. And although I survived, I know that night changed something inside me forever. Now, I live constantly on edge, knowing that not all places are exactly what they seem, and that sometimes, fate can choose the worst moment to put you in the path of something much bigger than yourself. It was a quiet night at Wendy's, almost empty, except for a few scattered customers and the reduced crew for the graveyard shift. I was cleaning the tables when I smelled a strong scent of smoke coming from the kitchen. I rushed in and saw flames starting to spread in the corner where the industrial oven was located. At first, I thought it was some kind of accident, maybe a short circuit or spilled hot oil. But something immediately bothered me. The fire seemed controlled, as if it were being directed towards certain areas. It wasn't the random chaos you'd expect from an accidental fire. It almost felt like someone knew exactly where they wanted the flames to start. I shouted for the other employees to evacuate while I tried to put out the flames with a fire extinguisher, but the fire kept spreading too quickly. Before we could get out, the front door was blocked from the outside. A group of masked men entered through the back door, carrying fuel canisters and weapons. They didn't say a word, just started spreading more flammable liquid across the floor as the flames grew rapidly. "Are you guys insane?" I shouted, trying to make my way to the exit. One of them grabbed me by the arm and slammed me against the wall. "You shouldn't have been here," he said calmly, as if it were routine. That's when I realized, this fire wasn't an accident. It was a message, or maybe a cleanup. Someone had planned all of this, and we were just unwilling pieces on their chessboard. As we tried to protect ourselves, I noticed something even more disturbing: hidden boxes in the back of the storage room, partially exposed by the flames. Inside them, there were documents and photos of gagged people, along with detailed maps of other franchise locations. It was clear that this Wendy's was being used for something much bigger than serving burgers, and someone was making sure everything was destroyed. The photos showed frightened faces, some with signs of abuse, as if they were prisoners. The maps had handwritten notes marking specific routes and times. My mind started racing, trying to understand what was happening. It was as if the restaurant had been part of a secret criminal operation, and now they were destroying all the evidence, including anyone who might have seen something suspicious. I managed to escape through the back with another employee, but not before seeing the manager being dragged away by the masked men. He screamed for help, but they shoved him into a black car parked outside. That was the last time I saw him. When the police arrived minutes later, the restaurant was already engulfed in flames, consumed by the fire. Officially, the case was recorded as an accident caused by electrical failures. But I knew the truth: it had been planned to silence those who knew too much. There was no going back to normal after that. I was alive, but the feeling of being marked was overwhelming. I knew I had seen something I wasn't supposed to, and that put me in constant danger. Days later, as I tried to process everything that had happened, I received an anonymous call. I answered with trembling hands, unsure of what to expect. A distorted voice said only, "Stay away from the next one." Before I could respond or ask anything, the call ended. I froze, holding the phone as if it might give me more answers. The message was clear: I knew too much, and they were warning me not to interfere again. But what did the next one mean? Were there other restaurants involved? Or were they planning something even bigger? I couldn't be sure, but one thing was evident: I wasn't safe. From that moment on, my life changed completely. I avoided any place that seemed remotely suspicious, even if it was just an ordinary restaurant. I changed my daily routine, took different routes to work, and started paying attention to every detail around me. Sometimes, when I saw a black car parked near where I was, I got chills down my spine, as if they were still watching me. I never went back to Wendy's, not as a customer, not as an employee. I knew that night had left marks that would never fade. It was as if I had seen beyond the facade of something no one was supposed to see, and now I had to live with the consequences of that for the rest of my life. Even with time, the sense of danger never fully left me. Every news story about mysterious fires or disappearances reminded me of that night. I tried to convince myself I was safe, but I knew it was just a matter of luck. After all, they had already warned me not to interfere, and I had no doubt they'd follow through on their threat if I crossed their path again. I even avoided talking about it with friends or family. It was like carrying a secret too heavy to share, something that could put anyone close to me in danger. Today, months later, I still think about those flames consuming everything around me, not just the restaurant, but also the people who were inside. Some of them were never seen again, others had their lives changed forever. And me? I survived, but not without scars. I can't look at a place like Wendy's anymore without feeling a tightness in my chest, reminded that not everything is what it seems. I learned the hard way that the world is full of dark secrets, often hidden in places where we least expect them. And now, whenever I see smoke rising in the distance or hear news about criminal operations being dismantled, I wonder, were they finally caught? Or are they still out there, planning the next accident? One thing is certain, that night changed my life forever, and I'll never be able to fully trust anything that seems too normal again.